Hello, welcome back to Sharks Happen. My name is Hal. I'm your host, going over shark attacks from the 1900s till present, mostly large sharks. And we'll get started right away over at Zelkowski State Beach, which is over in Oregon. The date is March 8th, 1992. Mike Allman is 21 years old, and he's out in the morning doing some surfing. His friend had taken a wave in, so he's out by himself. He's about 100 yards offshore. He's in 6 to 12 feet of water. It's 9:45 in the morning. He's sitting there, and he says he didn't know that he was attacked until his board was broken in half, and his shoulder was in the shark's mouth. The shark grabbed his board, clamping him to his board, and he got hit in the chin in the process. So the shark's momentum carried the shark's head out of the water. It wasn't a breach, but its head came out of the water enough to smack Mike in the chin, sending him backwards, but the shark grabbed him by the shoulder and released right away. Mike said a second or two, and the shark just released him, and they both settle in the water. Mike lands in the water. The shark settles into the water. There's waves, so the shark is bobbing up and down a little bit in the waves, and the waves push Mike right up against the shark. So they're side to side right up against each other. The shark starts slowly swimming off, so Mike starts pushing off with his hand to get distance from the shark. Shark swims off. He grabs what's left of his board and starts swimming in. His friend had met him out into the water, started bringing him in. He had paddled out to help him. He's bringing him in. Bystanders saw it. They got a hold of 911, and they ended up with a 5 to 10 centimeter gash to his shoulder. There was lacerations to his arm, and then there was a 4 to 6 centimeter gash to his waist or hip. So a single bite, single hit attack by a 6 to 7 meter great white. So you're talking, that's a 20 to 23 foot shark that hit this guy, and he's in 6 to 12 feet of water. Now the bottom is sand, and it's broken up by large rocks here and there. So you're in a sandy bottom, and I understand, and it's 20 yards south of a jetty. So, those are deep, and those will have sharks. We've had story after story of sharks coming out of the jetties. But the thing is the sharks are not doing this thing we're told about how they mistake boards and people. They're not mistaking boards and people. That 6 to 7 meter great white could not swim underneath that board to even look up at it. I don't think that it could. There's not enough room. I mean, it might have, but that's not what it's doing. It's checking them out from a distance like we've seen in drones, and then it's going after them when it decides. I wonder how deep. Somebody should ask a marine biologist when they bring up this, wetsuits and boards and this. How deep do they think that these surfboards are in the water? Do they think there's enough room? They're all off of a drop-off where you have enough room for them to breach like they do over. That's not what's happening. They're being hit from the side. I don't think that any of these now are mistaken identity of them thinking it's a seal at all. Now that I think about the depths of these surfboard attacks, many of them don't tell you a depth, but I highly doubt a lot of surfers are out there in 20 to 25 feet of water waiting on a wave. That might be, but the waves are created when it gets shallow. You aren't going to wait for a wave like that unless I think, those 50, 100 footers over there off Hawaii. I don't know how that works, but you guys let me know. You guys surf. Are you in deep water enough to where some 20-foot shark could get down far enough and mistake you, for a seal? Do you think that's possible? Because now that I think about it, that's the biggest crock that we've ever been sold by these people is when they're underneath a surfboard, they think that it's a seal. No, they don't. They're so close they can tell what it is. It ain't like they're down in the depths looking up like it's a seal that they're going after. I do believe that they go after seals without going up and checking it out first because they know what it is. But if it's us, they want to see what it is and decide what they're going to do. So that's our story of Mike Allman, 21 years old, an attack, not an attempt to predate. And we're going to head over to Stinson Beach, which is Marin County, California. The date is August 26, 1998. Jonathan Kathrein is 16 years old. He is out doing some boogie boarding. His friends are on the beach. He's out there by himself. He's 50 yards from shore. He's in 6 feet deep water. It's 2:15 in the afternoon. He is paddling so that the open ocean is to his right, the beach is to the left, and he's looking to the left as he's paddling, and his right hand touches something. He says large and cartilagey, and he looked over immediately to see what it was, hoping that it was a dolphin or a jellyfish, and he can't see anything. So he's paddling along, touches something, looks over, can't see anything in the water, thinks about it, and he starts turning his board to head to shore. And not 10 seconds after he had touched whatever was in the water, he gets hit. Shark grabs him by the leg. He screams. His friends look over from the beach, and they can see that he's being tugged under the water by a large shark. It's got him clamped to his boogie board with his leg, and it's dragging him under the water. It takes him 1 to 2 meters deep, so it takes him almost to the bottom of the water. It's a sand bottom, and he probably is right up against the bottom. And then they get up to the top of the water, and he says that he could just see the gills. He could see the large shape of it, and it was at least 4 feet in girth, and the gills were huge. And the shark has him by the leg. He's back by the gills. He tried to grab onto the shark to keep it from being able to bite him worse, and he couldn't get a good grip on around the shark, so he went ahead and grabbed on the inside of the gills. So he grabbed the cartilage of the gills, and he said as soon as he grabbed onto the gills, the shark released him, and then the shark swam off, and he made his way into shore. He needed to have extensive surgery. He had 2 crescent-shaped wounds to his leg that involved the hip, the knee, and part of the calf. It did some extensive damage, and he lost some tissue, and he would have some permanent disability, not major, but because of the tissue loss, he wouldn't be 100% again after that. He went through hours of surgery, but he did survive. I'm going to put it down as an attack, not an attempt to predate. Okay, now we're going to head over to Miller's Point, which is in False Bay, South Africa. The date is September 27th, 1978. Eric Lombard is 27 years old, and he is out doing some spear fishing. He's been in the water for 45 minutes. He's got himself just over 100 yards from shore in about 40 feet deep water. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He's got himself some rock lobsters that he had ended up getting himself, and he's got on his stringer a galgeon, a large fish. And he didn't know that a shark was in the area until the shark had grabbed the fish that was on his stringer. Now the shark grabs the fish, and he tries to swallow the fish, but he can't because it's on the stringer. Can't break the stringer, so he starts swimming off with it. Now Eric's being towed through the water on his back by this shark that's got his fish, and he's dragging it off. Well, the shark stops after a few seconds of just dragging him around, and turns and comes back at Eric with his mouth wide open, and it ends up getting the point. It doesn't even sound like Eric had meant to hit it with the spear. He had just got the point of the spear. The shark got it between his snout and his eye. So like in the side of the head, it might have been doing a side-to-side thing. And the shark had turned to Eric and snapped at him, bumped him first, and then snapped its jaws at him, and then turned and went back to the fish. Didn't injure him, just kind of letting him know, I don't want you around me. Obviously had no clue that he's connected to what he's trying to eat. But Eric says it went back and grabbed the fish, and now as it went to swim off, it did break the line. So now he watches the shark as it's swimming off. He says that it seemed to be playing with the fish it was swimming off. And that kind of reminds me of my favorite clip that I have of the great white with the tuna fish head. I think it's a tuna fish head. But the shark seems to be playing with it. I mean, they can bite through them if they want. So why they don't end up doing that most of the time when they're doing that is kind of surprising. I'm wondering if they're playing with them or not. But yeah, he was out there and he gets no injury. But this one reminds me of the only I've had comments in the comments section. I've had questions on nightmares for doing this show. I don't have any. And I've had one in the whole time I've been doing this show. I've had one shark nightmare. And it was less than a minute, maybe less than a minute. But the nightmare is, you know, how you pop into a dream. I just popped in, boom, I'm standing somewhere, and I'm not paying attention to the dog. But you know how when you got a large dog and you're trying to keep them away from your crotch, and you're just pushing on them and pushing on them to keep them away from you? Well, I look down, and I'm not pushing a large dog away like I'm thinking I'm doing in this dream. I'm standing in water. My back is against a wall, like a breakwater wall, a steel wall, and then what I'm holding is like a bull shark. It's like 2 feet wide, the front of the shark, and it's snapping at me. I'm holding it by its snout, but each time it's snapping, it's getting closer and closer. We're in thigh-high water, so it's getting closer and closer to my groin, and just as it up against me. Now I can't hold it back anymore. The shark's up against me. Its snout's up against my stomach, and before it can bite again, I woke up. So the good thing about those nightmares is you wake up from the things. But that's the only one I've had, and this reminded me of it with it coming up and just kind of bumping them and then snapping its jaws at them and going its other way. That snapping the jaws at you and going the other way, that's like an orca. Orcas have done that to divers. I have an orca book. The guy dove in the water for the first time with transient orcas, and the largest one in the pod came over, and it swam as fast as it could, stopped like a foot from him, and snapped in front of his face. And after that, it just hung out with them like they were cool, but it was trying to intimidate him. Sounds kind of like what the shark was doing, but territorial. He wanted him out of there. Luckily, he didn't bite him to do so. We'll put it down as an attack, no injury, no attempt to predate. Okay, now we're going to go over to Sardinia Bay, which is in Eastern Cape Province, South Africa. The date is May 29th, 1998. Marc Jucker is 15 years old, and he and some friends are out doing some bodyboarding. They're pretty far out. He's got a friend, Sean, who's out with him, so he says that the two of them are pretty far out, and he looks over his shoulder at Marc to see Marc being taken under the water by a shark, and then he says it looks like the shark is on top of him. He says it's just a huge shark, biggest shark he's ever seen, that seems to be on top of him now. And another buddy, Zach, is coming from shore. He's paddling out at the time the attack happens. He says that he saw the shark's fin, and it was huge. It was out of the water and kind of undulating back and forth as the shark had Marc by the arm and was shaking around. Marc says he was sitting there on the board, and he was all of a sudden hit, and the shark had grabbed him by the arm, that the board took the brunt of it, and that the shark was sitting there when it was shaking. It only had the board, and it was shaking the board around for, a few seconds, which was probably what the witness at the beach, Zach, saw coming from the beach paddling out, saw that he was doing this thrashing. Well, the thrashing was with the board, luckily, and not the arm. And as soon as the shark ended up breaking the leash, so the leg leash broke, the shark let go of the board and he left. So the shark just swam off. Marc grabbed his board and went into shore, but he had said that he could see his elbow. So the bite had taken all the way down, stripped away most of his bicep was gone. They had to skin graft part of his tricep into his bicep, and he had to go ahead and go through all his recovery and hours of surgery to deal with that. Put it down as an attack, not an attempt to predate. Okay, now we're going to finish out our unprovoked attacks over in Sarasota Bay, which is in Florida. The date is August 15th, 2007. Andrea Lynch is 20 years old at the time, and her and some friends, they took a dinghy out to a new college-owned boat. They say a new college-owned boat that's anchored out in the bay, so it's got to be 200 yards from shore. It's nighttime. They get out to the boat. Two of the friends go into the boat, and they're standing up on the boat. Andrea and another friend, they go into the water, and they're swimming at night. Andrea is just laying there floating. She doesn't even say she's doing she's just floating, and suddenly she's bit, and she's grabbed, she's shaken, and whatever grabbed her released and swam off. She got up onto the boat, went back to the boat, got up on the boat, and she told her friends, guys, I think I've been bit by something, and they started laughing, telling her she's crazy. So she reaches back, and she can feel all kinds of gashes on her back. So now they have to get her in. They look out. Nobody's now in the dinghy, so the dinghy had floated off. Nobody wants to swim out to the dinghy because the attack just happened, so they call 911, and while they're waiting, it takes 4 of them. There's 17 lacerations on her body. It takes 4 of them to put pressure on all of them to get the bleeding in check so that she can get in and get stitched up. Like I said, 17 lacerations in her body, teeth marks, in between the ribs, got her between the ribs, but didn't get to her lung, just came just shy of her lung and didn't hit any organs, so they were able to sew her up. Over 100 stitches. But swimming at night, yeah, that's not a good thing. The bull shark going in and grabbing you like that, for it to come up and grab her in the body, you know, if it grabbed her in the hand, shook and left, I would think, you know, probably saw some reflection on the hand, or just the off color of the palm to the skin or whatever of the rest of the body if you got a tan, and it thought it was a fish, but it grabbed her body. So maybe it thought it was you know, something that was dead just floating up there on the water, that I'm sure they eat all the time when they find a, you know, dolphins, whales, whatever it is floating up on the water. They'll go ahead and eat it. So sounds like that's what happened to her. Just grabbed her and shook her. But I'll post a link to this story. One of the stories that I went off of on this has got pictures of the wound after the fact, after it's scarring, but you get an idea of the biting. I wanted to see the bite radius on it. It's hard to see a bite radius because it looks like it just bit and shook, and in the shaking it bit and let go and bit again, by what I see. It's a crazy looking bite, but that's a lot of stitches to have to go through for a little 6-foot shark. I mean little, but still. So that's our story of Andrea Lynch, an attack, not an attempt to predate, by a bull shark. Okay, now we're going to finish out our show with You Don't Hear That Every Day. Back in 1893 in Havana, Cuba, they were having a celebration of Spain's king's birthday and the king's son's anniversary of his birthday, it says. And they were having this big, they had the main attraction, which was the bullfighting. That was the main feature of this celebration. Second biggest feature was Margulies is his name, and he's a balloonist. And people were there to watch him go up in his balloon and do his little trapeze stuff. He goes up there and he has like a wrestler's outfit or some kind of leotards or something, and he puts a trapeze over the side and he just hangs outside of the basket as he goes up in the air. And his plan was go straight up and come straight down and hopefully land somewhere in the city or just outside the outskirts of the city. Well, when he got himself back to a half a mile up, the gentleman telling the story says that the winds took him, you could see the winds hit the balloon and push him. So now he's being pushed out towards the bay. And this is shark-infested waters. This is terribly shark-infested waters. I guess people don't even go into this water. It's so bad. And he's being pushed out from it. So they said that as the wind starts taking him, they see Margulies climb up and climb back into the basket. And now the basket starts coming down fast. They know that he pulled the release because he wants to get down before he gets out into that water. Well, it was too late, because he was too far out over into the bay. Well, the gentleman telling the story was on a boat, told the engineer of the boat to start the boat and head as fast as he can over to the spot where he thought that the balloon would land. And they were just couldn't get there in time. They were 200 yards shy of that basket hitting the water. But just before the basket hit the water, they saw Margulies stand up, climbed up, and stood up on top of the side of the basket, and then dove headfirst into the water. So he made a clean dive into the water just before that thing hit. Luckily, that impact probably would have been terrible. And then they saw his head pop up as he came up from diving into the water. But right as soon as they saw that, they said about a dozen large fins, cutting the water, heading right for him. By the time they got to the area, which was probably less than a minute later, all they saw was bloody spots in the water. There were blood swirls here and there, eddies in the water. They called it a blood. So the sharks took and they tore Margulies to shreds before they were able to get there. You don't hear about that every day to have, that's like if Evel Knievel got eaten by sharks. Oh, wait. Fonzie jumping the shark. Fonzie got ate by sharks. That would be kind of like this. So that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back in a few more days with another show of attacks. Until then, if you go into that water, you are much more afraid of those sharks than they are of you.